Well, hello, good morning, good evening, wherever you are right now, and welcome to Black Mental Health Matters. Now, our mission here is to encourage open dialogue around mental health among Black communities. Now, I'm your host, Amanda Eke. Today, we have a very special guest with us, and we'll be discussing all about from burnout to flourishing, how prioritizing mental health in the workplace benefits everyone. Please sit back and enjoy. All right, everyone. Right now, we're going to welcome to the stage our very, very special guest today. Um, Dr. Willett, please do tell us a little bit about yourself. Do you want me to call you Dr. Willett or Dr. Candance?
You know what? You can call me Candace since it's just me.
Okay. Please do tell us a little bit about yourself.
You can call me Candance. It's Amanda. I actually reside here in the Washington D.C. area. I actually work the burnout time. I also actually love making sure one is psychologically safe when they're at work, and tools we can use to be better at work, better in our personal lives. And so I've been doing this work for about 5 years now. At one point, I was in the workplace burnout resiliency space where I actually was working for a national hospital when we were actually doing this work. And I think it's very essential, especially coming out of COVID. We have seen that flourishing in the workspace is very important, especially coming out of a pandemic, trying to figure our lives out post pandemic. So I'm glad to be here. And if you guys have any questions, we're going to get started.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Candance. Let's begin just with the basic question. I mean, what creates burnout in the workplace environment? What really causes employees to burn out? And let's really define for you, Doc, what does that term burnout even officially mean?
So burnout, it can look different in many groups, right? And so emotionally exhaustion and ineffectiveness in the workplace, which causes we have the overload, we have the under challenge, and we have the neglected burnout. And this is when workers start to feel emotionally exhausted. They're effective, and then it starts showing in their work. And then it's plagued with symptoms such as rigid thinking, irritability, difficulty sleeping, decrease in attention and memory, and then they're thinking about quitting their job or leaving the profession altogether. And so they're having these types of emotions, and then also your work is affected. You you're coming to work, and so that's
Absolutely. So I'm curious then, in your work, what have you seen workers saying really that has it been different from person to person that you've seen kind of report these burnout symptoms? What is kind of the most common thing that you've seen in your practice that really caused burnout, if there is one common thing?
I will say it was a multitude of things that cause burnout, right? And so for the types of burnout, you have the overloaded burnout, where a worker that feels like they're getting overloaded with um, and they feel like no one else is helping them. And then you have the under who feels like they're not getting enough work, so they're bored. And then you have the neglect for their work. Their mind is kind of like their mind is in neutral and finding other things to do to achieve that void while they're at work. And so I think all of those combined, one person can have all three signs of burnout. But I think the biggest part is, the definition of the job satisfaction, the recognition. The biggest piece is the recognition of, my leadership is not recognizing the work that I'm doing, regardless of the three types of burnout you fall into. They feel like leadership is not listening, or haven't created a positive working environment where they can share and be open, and employees feel silence when they come for new ideas to the table, feel like their ideas are even on the table to be considered, and then recognition of if I do a good job. And so that's another that can have a negative adaptation to, why in the workplace. And then also you have conflicts that are not mitigated appropriately, and so you have all mitigating factors that cause out in the workplace and cause people not to flourish.
For sure. Okay. Now let me ask you this too. When we're looking at some of these factors, it can be very difficult for people to actually speak up for themselves. Is one thing that I know I've known from personal experience. How do you kind of conduct a place and create an environment where workers can even ask for opportunities to exist with parity, to exist with healthy boundaries? How does a worker even start that conversation with an employer? There's such a hierarchy of authority. There's such a hierarchy of even fear, in the workplace, being able to speak your truth. How can people kind of mold themselves around that to be able to use their voice?
Well, first, you know, leadership starts from the top down, right? Transparency and trust starts from top down. And so we have to make sure that we are actually, as leaders, creating a work environment that first has that foundation of trust. So once you have that trust, then you can start building on that. So, and then also once you start having the trust and the transparency, then you begin to find that people are having a better a safe environment to share ideas and be a team player, but also getting to know your employees. And so with that being said, leadership has also have to be aware, find out what their issues are when it comes to leading teams, so your team members can feel safe when they're sharing their ideas. And then also you have to make sure that you are given that what we call a positive working environment, healthy working environment. So when you have that foundational trust, then in that open door policy, you can find that they are taking that information and actually implement it into the practices within the workplace. But first, leadership has to be able to get that knowledge, right? That feedback and receive that feedback. We don't call it constructive criticism. We call it constructive feedback. So everyone needs to get that feedback of how they're doing. Do those what we call pressure points, where the leadership is sitting down with each individual person on their team, getting to know their team. And if a leader is not willing to sit down with their team individually and understand what each individual personality is and how their working styles are and what can they bring to the table, then that'll be an issue with how an employee opens up in the workplace, especially to leadership.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Candance. And we're actually going to introduce our second guest. Please do introduce yourself, Mohammed. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and all that good stuff.
All right, then. Thank you for having me. I hope I'm audible. All right, then. So, first, I should apologize for coming in late. Yes, it's a learning curve having to join this platform on YouTube. So, Dr. Candance, yes, thanks for the preamble. Now, my name is Mohammed Ahmed Ademola. I am a positive clinical psychologist. I currently run private practice in Nigeria. And aside my academic background as a researcher and as a management consultant within the academia, I train counselors would be in therapy skills, and I also conduct research in communities within Nigeria. So, but outside that scope, I think I want to talk about what relates more to what we have in the house today. I'm the director for youth mental health for Asido Foundation. I also volunteer for quite a few government and non-governmental agencies, but I'm very passionate around mental health issues, and I've been advocating for a positive work environment within the employee work sector in Nigeria. So when this topic came up, I said yes, it's a platform to actually discuss and share ideas. So essentially, I have my own company. I run psychological services for both individual and group therapeutic interventions, and I have quite several other collaborations. I think that should suffice for now. Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the introduction, Mohammed. Now, let me turn to you. I want to ask you, let's see, what is kind of for you, and I asked Candance this, what defines burnout in the workplace? I feel like we all have such different definitions, different limits, different boundaries. For you in your professional practice, what would you define as burnout in the workplace?
Okay, so with the dynamism in the scope, or what I say, the landscape of the workplace, what we see as burnout is always that negative position as to how an individual
All right. It looks like we have lost Mohammed temporarily, but okay, no problem. No worries. We keep things rolling on the show. All right. Now looks like we lost both of our guests. Quick moment as we kind of get things together. Everyone watching, give us one moment. everyone. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that little short intermission. I know I did. After some technical difficulties, we'll be welcoming everyone back to the stage. Dr. Candance, please do. Let's continue our amazing conversation. How are you doing after that short break? I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I am doing fine.
All right,
Just had to
perfect. Well, let's
regroup.
get back to there we go. Regroup. That's what you got to do. Strategize and regroup. There we go. Now, you know what? Let's go back to you. Now, I'm really, Muhammad had just kind of defined his definition of burnout. Now, kind of let's go back to this kind of idea. What is kind of this idea? How can friendly working relationships between coworkers and supervisors exist? Like I said before we left for break, how do you really create that? How is that possible to ever create with that hierarchy that's innately built in the workforce of supervisor, employee? How can those relationships really be created from your experience?
I mean, they can be created. They're also created through collaboration between your leadership and your um, through your workers, but you have to make that a priority, right? So you have to make sure that both are aware of what their, I won't say hangups are, but what their differences are, so you can turn those into positives. And then also one thing, well, a few things here as a leader. Number one, when you sit down with each individual employee on your team, you have to make sure that you are defining their job roles, those boundaries within those job roles, also your expectations or the collaboration of the expectations of goals throughout the year or quarterly, also having that feedback from the employee themselves, also giving that flow of information. So what you don't want to create is a hostile working environment or a unsafe working environment mentally. So when I say that, so for an example, when you come up for your performance review, right, a lot of people don't find out what their leadership really feel about their work, or how they really communicate about their work, is doing the performance review. That is the wrong time to say, okay, all of your work was subpar. That is the wrong time for you to present your employee with that information, because if it has been 6 months since you have sat down with your employee about their performance, they don't need to hear it at the performance review mark. They need to have those checkpoints, those post points throughout that 6 months. So do a monthly check-in, see how that person's doing, not just professionally, but personally, because they may have some things going on in their personal lives where they can't meet those deadlines, or they need a mental health day. They need certain resources. So if you only go to your employee during their performance review, then you have already failed your employee. And then that employee cannot flourish in the workplace, because once they get a negative review on their performance review, it sends a negative signal saying, okay, they don't value my work. I need to start looking for another job.
Yeah.
I'm not getting recognized. Every time the leadership talks to me is only if I'm doing something negative. And so I think, like I said, that constructive feedback, where they actually need to have those post points where they're actually saying, okay, this month, you're doing great. Always reward your team, regardless if it's a verbal or if it's a lunch or something. Do something to say that you appreciate your workers, because if you don't say that or do that, then it causes individuals not to value even coming to work. So when I always say, when an employee starts having a negative disposition before they even get to work, that's a sign of burnout. And that means that they do not trust their leadership. They don't even trust their teammates. And so you have to as a collaborative effort, you have to make sure that you are putting in the time for, you have to want to be present when you are being in a collaborative effort of how to make sure that you are setting that foundation of trust. You're setting that foundation of, psychological safety. You're setting that milestone for being able to resolve conflict in the workplace, because that's another thing. What if there's conflict among workers and leadership is not doing anything about it? That causes another issue. In a person that is dealing with conflict, they're saying, okay, if the leadership hasn't did anything about it, or leadership is letting it slide if they know about it, well, what's the point of me even working here? They
Yeah.
have since checked out. They have checked out because we all know, burnout does lead to some types of bullying and conflict in the workplace. So we have to make sure that burnout does not lead to that extreme.
Absolutely. And Candance, I think you make such a great point because you mentioned if you don't tell people about the if the supervisor doesn't bring up any what the employee needs to work on till the check-in, which could be 6 or even 8 months into the job. I mean, that is such a kind of almost adding insult to injury. Because what have I been doing for these last 6 months where you've literally told me nothing, you've expressed nothing to me? Absolutely, that is a really good flag to know. Now, I'm kind of curious though for people. Obviously, we know there's some people they're going to experience burnout, but they're not going to leave a situation. Financial strengths, personal strengths. A lot of people are attached to jobs maybe that have burnt them out for the past decade even. What is your kind of advice for the people where realistically they can't leave that situation? How do you kind of meddle in that? How do you kind of make it better for yourself? How does someone work within that?
So if you look at data, especially in the last like 3 or 4 years during COVID, you had individuals that were leaving positions they have been in for 5+ years. Now, we all know in the last 10 years, um, employees have been jumping jobs because they was like, once I reach a certain level, I see that they are not I'm not prevailing, I'm not reaching, I'm reaching that glass ceiling and can't, bust through it, so I'm gonna move on to something else. Where you have also, when you look at workers that have been at a position for 5, 10+ years, in 20 years ago, that was a great thing to stay in a position for 10+ years, and
Yeah.
you reap all the benefits. But I think a lot of people that have been on the job for 10, 15+ years, they're not doing, they're comfortable, right? And so they're comfortable in their role. Now, this does not go for people that love their job. This is not it. Well, what we're referring to are individuals that have been on the job for 10+ years. They have became the disgruntled worker, but
Mm.
they fear leaving due to the comfortability that they have formed in that role with their
Yeah,
leadership and with the company.
absolutely.
And you want to make sure that you evaluate that. So you have gotten you have fell into the being comfortable financially, comfortable, with what you have, what work restraints you have or what work flourishment you do have. But you have to also make sure that you're doing those checkpoints with yourself, because once you become to the burnout stage, that can be chronic. It can be chronic for stress, chronic for yourself. That means you're not being beneficial to the company or the organization whatsoever. So you have to make sure that you're doing those yearly checkpoints. And usually you will see most of this not at their employment, but in their personal lives, especially if they have a significant other. That person will say, boy, she really doesn't like her job, but she doesn't want to leave out of fear, right? Or he doesn't want to leave his job out of fear. And so we have to make sure that we are doing those what we call yearly checkpoints with ourselves, but also making sure that we are setting goals. Now, it's okay to be in a job for 10, 15, 20 plus years if you're happy. But if you're not happy, you're doing a very negative disservice to yourself when you are actually staying in a position that you feel like you're not getting fulfilled. Because once that happens, it's almost like an abusive relationship. You stay because you want to stay. You think things are going to get better. You think that you're going to move up. You're thinking all these things, these excuses for yourself to make you stay. But instead, you have to make sure that you have to do that checkpoint. If you're not happy, have you, used utilize your resources? Have you spoken to your leadership? Have you spoken to HR? Have you did any type of professional development inside of the organization? Do the organization have a mentorship program where you can float around to other divisions or departments within your organization? Have
Yeah.
you know, tapped into those types of resources so you can get your why back for working there, and so you won't be spreading that what we call a cancer? Because once you start coming to work negative, that is a cancer that spreads through the workforce, and it is shown through the work and the vision and mission of the organization.
Absolutely. No, you make such a great point. Being able to reach out to some of those resources, especially if you can. No, that's absolutely great advice. Now, I want to know what are some, let's say, if we could make a list. I want to know what are some green flags of a healthy workplace where people are not, where people are flourishing, and then what are some. Well, we'll start off with the green flags. What are some green flags of a workplace that you enter into where you can see visually, whether from the interview or from actually now actually working at a place? What are those green flags that a person, an employee, whether it be prospective employee or current employee, for you to look out for a workplace that is actually flourishing?
So green flags, what you want to look for is, you know, those, if you walk into an organization and you pull out an employee and you ask them, hey, how do you like working here? And you see them shift, but they smile, and they're very open to telling you about, I love working here. This is what our company does. Sharing what, first of all, when you're happy and you're positive, you share that with the world.
Yeah.
And you make sure that you want everybody to know that your organization is a great place to work for. You can see it in how they market. You see on their websites, what are they doing when they're doing their tutorials about how people are flourishing in their workspace, giving employees the space to be authentic, giving them the space to share ideas. And you can see that through the process, and you can see where if someone has been there for, five years plus, they have moved up the ladder, and you can say, you know what, I love working here. And they have put in place their, I won't say, I will say progressive, where they are saying that, if employees suggested this, then we have implemented this. For an example, a wellness program where you're doing a checkpoint and you realize that at least 70% of your workforce is using the wellness plan that they have put in place. That's a good sign. That means that people are actually
Yeah.
using those resources. Also, you do another checkpoint where you actually are recognizing different subsets of groups, or you're actually, so for an example, here in the U.S., we have women's History Month. You're actually celebrating those diversity groups and being inclusive to your workforce, and you're actually recognizing everybody for what the jewels that they do bring to the table. And then
Mm.
programs, having those programs, being social responsible, having morale checks,
Yeah. Absolutely.
mental health days, and then also your referral program. A lot of people don't think about that. So if an employee is referring people to your organization, that
Mhm.
means they do like the organization, because 9 times out of 10, if someone don't like something, they're not going to refer you to it. So if they are
Yeah.
referring other people outside of the organization to come work for them, that's a great sign. And then also having that collaborative effort. When you start looking at, the overall workload and work production, what does that say about your workforce? Like, when you look internally about the errors of the job and the tasks that are being done, what are the error margins? Is it low? Is it high? Or is it in between? Was it due to errors in their work? So we have to make sure that, the error percentages will go down. More cohesiveness among the team. That's a green flag. I'm sorry. When the leadership is actually being collaborative and open and
Mhm. Yeah.
trustworthy and transparent, that flow of information back and forth. You're not timid. You are in a healthy state. You are
Mhm.
actually taking vacation, because
Yeah.
usually when someone feels like their job is on the line, they're not getting recognized, you don't have people taking vacation, and that's a big deal too. So if they are taking vacation and they are enjoying it, and then also given the tools such as, unlimited PTO, or giving them hours such as to volunteer, to do things that they love outside of the organization, given that space to be flourishing in that working environment. Those are the green flags that we look for.
Absolutely. No, that's gorgeous. I love that idea of referrals. If people from the company or organization, if they're referring people, apply here, apply there, that's definitely a big thing, because usually when people are happy where they're at, they'll tell the world about where they work. No, that's such a great point. And then I love the celebrating those months for diversity and inclusion. That's a big thing, and obviously making sure that it's not just surface level superficial diversity,
Right.
but actually we actually value culture, value different cultures. So no, that's absolutely dropping gems. I love that. Now tell us, now, what are the red flags to look for, to see know regarding an unhealthy work environment where people are burnt out? What are things for people to keep their eyes on?
Red flags, high turnover. Um, when people come to work, they're not productive.
Mm,
As soon as they come to work, they're already negative. So remember, said earlier, going back to the reference early, if you get up out of bed and you're already in a state of, what, I don't feel like going to this job, you have more call outs where you call out at the last minute. Um, and people are just not happy. You have a lot of conflict that has arise, and then sometimes that often move into the bullying and workplace violence. That's the extreme portion, but it does happen, and those are things that we have to think about too, where people come to work, they're disgruntled. You have leadership that is absent. They're not present with their teams. You
yeah.
have higher leadership. When we're talking about higher leadership, we're talking about leadership, not their direct supervisor, but we're talking about higher leadership, the C-suite leaders, where they have no clue what's going on in their organization. They don't understand,
Yeah.
why people are having high turnover. Right? When they hear about it, is at the board meeting. All leaders should be present when it comes to their employees. You have a lot of complaints for all types of things, from harassment, bullying. You start getting those high numbers for harassment and conflict, and then also it's the the vision is being affected, the mission is being affected. People are complaining bluntly at work, like everyone is just completely just negative. There's no positivity anywhere, and leadership just looks over that as, you just need to come to work and do your job. And then you also have health problems where people start having that, they fall into that chronic stress mode where, they start getting headaches more, where that's where the call outs come in. You start calling out, you start having health problems such as high blood pressure, or you're not eating right because you're stressed out. Sleep problems. You don't have a healthy sleep regimen. You're not eating because you're not taking your lunch or breaks when you need to. So you just start having all those issues at work, and they start to show up in ways, not just, anger or any of those things, but they start showing up as your physical health and your mental health is starting to be affected.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And we have a comment from Antonio Killian Jr. joining us from LinkedIn. They say that is so true about more call-ins when the workplace environment is not pleasant. So no, those are such great. Thank you for that comment. And candidates, absolutely, those are really good things to know. Those are really, really pivotal red flags. So, my next question, kind of going into now from the kind of micro to now the overall arching of society. How just as society can we create more equitable learning and development opportunities for all workers? How can we create more situations where people are flourishing? Is it something with training supervisors? I know I've worked in places where supervisors just were untouchable. Like you said, with the red flags, a lot of them didn't even understand even names of people and company culture. Literally, they're just kind of a figurehead. How can like society really create better environments to develop these opportunities for more workers to flourish?
So, number one, the first thing when it comes to change is identifying what is the root cause of the issue that you're having, right? And
Mm,
so when you identify that issue, so if an organization, like society wise, we have to make sure that we're focusing on your health, those pillars of health, your mental, your emotional, your social, your psychological, your environment. You have to think about all these things. We have to make sure that we're putting forth effort, that we're making sure that once the individual, your health is great, and then we have to start um, expanding to the collaborative effort. This is a community approach. This is not just an organizational approach, but a community social approach where we have to make sure that we are valuing the individuals, right, and their health. That's number one. Regardless of where you work or what you do, your health is number one. If
mm,
your health is out of sync, you cannot do anything.
yes.
So
Yeah.
once you get your health in sync, you have to make sure that you're taking that and you're pouring into yourself before you pour into others, right? And so what I mean by that is that as a society, we have to make sure that we are breaking down those stigmas around mental health, around emotional health, around psychological health. We have to make sure that we are actually putting resources and information sharing and awareness to what we know as we need to make sure that our employees are better. We need to make sure our employees are healthy. And you have to do that by focusing on your employees. And so if your employees are not well, the organization will not flourish. So, as a society, we have to break down those stigmas by also outreach, awareness, and training for everyone. And if you're in a leadership role, you have to make sure that you first have to identify your issues, right? So we can break down those walls and have an open mind to make sure that you are being the best transformative and servant leader as possible. And so once you realize that you have to make sure that we're going forward and using those tools, using those resources around wellness programs, using the health education tools and promotion programs that we have, or developing those tools to make sure that employees are actually well, and then being supportive, building that social support system around employees, the community, making sure that they have access to care, access to resources, bringing down those barriers to social determinants of health. We have to make sure that we're breaking down those barriers, because if someone comes to work and they lack food at home, or they can't get
Yeah.
home because they lack transportation, then that's a problem. How can we better assist them with that? Make sure that we're not working in silos, because a lot of organizational resources outside of organizations don't work together. They work in silos. Making sure that the information is accessible to all of your employees. And so just breaking down those barriers and using the tools, and hiring individuals that know this work. They actually know how to go in and make sure that you're providing resources like as therapy and things that they may need in order for them to flourish overall and have good well-being.
Absolutely. No, absolutely dropping gems. No, I love how you said just even just the basic necessities. Like if someone doesn't have food, how are they going to be able to work? If someone doesn't have transportation, these are all things that really are conducive to a flourishing work environment, no matter the organization. So absolutely. And I want to ask you I want to go back to, we had asked this a little earlier, but again, how can we as workers have more autonomy and just have a bigger voice in the workplace when things are going left, when things are not going right? What is your advice for people to really develop that voice, that autonomy for themselves?
Well, again, that will focus that right there. So, for an example, if I see that there is an issue, um, you want to use your command structure, and if you use a command structure and nothing has happened, then you can take other steps. But the best way to be vocal about your concerns is, number one, let your leadership know, your direct supervisor, and if your direct supervisor doesn't listen, then move that on up to the next person, because everybody has a boss. And then once you establish that, or you can always go to human resources and say, you know what, I have this idea, or I have a concern that I saw. Can we investigate that? And then also being a positive light, because if you do things in a positive tandem, you will be heard more. But if you do it in a negative way, it brings this disposition to you. And then so you have to make sure that you're strategic about what you're doing. Documentation. Make sure that you're using your resources inside of the organization. That you know what, you saw something, you were concerned, and you do have the intent, the positive intent to change it. Now, if you're just a person that just wants to just have a complaint about something, but you don't have a solution, or you don't know what that solution is, and you don't plan on changing anything, that's not for you, right? But for someone that actually wants to make change, you have to start leading in a way. You may have to become a leader yourself, ensuring that you are informing the correct people, taking notes, having being able to create dialogue among your coworkers to get that buy-in. Because once enough people start saying something is not right, usually leadership starts to say, okay, maybe we need to change that. But you have to advocate for yourself, as always. Advocate, advocate, advocate. If you see something and you know it's not right, say something and make sure that you want to gather that change, and then also put forth the solutions that make it change that, or put together a report. Leadership love reports, right? And so put together a report saying, I saw this is what can happen, this has happened, this is a solution to that cause. And so how can we better be effective in our work? So just having those now I won't say guardrails, but making sure that you're doing that in a positive way and your intent is to change. So just speaking up and advocating for yourself. I always tell someone, if you can't advocate for yourself, get someone else to advocate for you if they have the best intentions at heart.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm a firm believer documentation is everything, especially in the workplace. You must document everything because that's really the straw holding you together and your validity, so no, I agree with that completely. I love those dropping some gems, Candance. And as we kind of wrapping up, let me take this question from someone again from Antonio Killian Jr. joining us from LinkedIn. Said, as you know, African Americans and people of color sometimes do not value the importance of mental health. In what ways can I encourage African Americans, especially those 65 and older, to take time to focus on mental health? And, I kind of want to remix that question too. The workforce, how we look at it today, the people of today versus the people of yesteryears, the workforce has changed quite a bit. Civil rights, social rights, different things. There are people that are definitely from, let's say, 65 and older. They're from a whole different generation in the workforce. How do you kind of tell those people, advocate for them to advocate, for their own mental health? I know a lot of people that are a bit older and they definitely they have a stern, work is work. You come with you just do the work, mental health, that's not a thing. If you're getting treated wrongly, that's not your priority. You got to just focus on work. How do you kind of talk to those people of a different generation about that?
So again, that goes back to, being valued, right?
Mm,
In society, we have a ageism problem. And so
yeah,
when you just say, you know what, we're not going to focus on them, but now we really have to focus on them because truth be told, they still want to be heard. We have to make sure that we are making sure that they are heard, and they are also our. Some of them are our SMEs in certain spaces because they have been doing that role for so long, or they've been in that field for so long. They value. They're all valued, and we have to make sure that we're getting their feedback as well, and to make sure that their ideas are being heard. Because if you do talk to a lot of people 65 and over, they have not been heard. And usually
yeah,
it's in a space of, we're going to take you out of this role and put you in a less, effective role, kind of like pushing them out, so to speak. And the thing is, if they're able and they're doing the work, and they are all the way there, and they are present mentally and physically, they need to be heard. And we often have to make sure that we're not being biased towards the older workforce. And we have to make sure that we are actually bringing them into the fold, bringing them to the table to understand what their issues are and addressing those issues, but not just the millennial, the 65 and younger, or even now the 40 and under, because the 40 and under have a totally different mindset than 40
yeah,
to 65 and 65 and older. So we have to make sure that we're bringing everybody. It has to be an inclusive workforce. Then also as in the Black community, we have to make sure that we as everyone, we have to be on one accord, but also we have to make sure that we are bringing awareness to what mental health really is. And it doesn't look the same for everybody, and it's different. It shows up different, and we have to make sure that we're bringing down those stigmas and those. And when we're talking about mental health and presenting in a way, we have to change our mindsets around how we talk about mental health in the community. Because if we're always saying, this person, this and putting a label to it or putting a bias to it, then we have to make sure that we're changing that language and that mindset around what we really think mental health is when it shows up differently in everybody. And so just bringing those collaborative efforts to the table, because what's going to happen, this is a collaborative effort. This is not a one. This is not a I. You have to make sure that everyone is included when you're making these decisions, and then also just having an open mind and changing your language about mental health altogether, and then educating. The big part of mental health stigma is the lack of education, or the lack of not even, trying to associate or disassociate with it. And so we have to make sure that we're educating and engaging. Those are the big pieces of stigma, demoralizing the stigma around mental health, and then taking those frameworks and applying it to the workforce.
Absolutely, absolutely. Candance, you're just dropping gems. I'm sure a lot of people are taking notes as you're really telling us all these things. And, as we're wrapping up, I have a last question for you. I mean, what can we just do to just continue to flourish in our workplaces? What are some easy step-by-step kind of guides for everyday people, no matter what your age is? How can we just take easy steps to be able to flourish in our workplaces daily?
Well, number one, you want to make sure that you advocate for yourself, right? We have to make sure we speak up. If you can't speak up, write it down, send an email, right? We have to make sure that we're speaking up for ourselves. Number two, make sure that you're looking out for your mental health, but your overall health. How are you feeling? How are you doing? If you can't show up at least 95%, you may need to step back and take some mental health days. Take your vacation. That's number three. Take your vacation. Your job will be there. Make sure that you are taking those mental health days. Make sure that you're spending time and pouring into yourself. Because if you can't pour into yourself, you cannot pour from an empty cup by helping others. You have to help yourself. When the airplane says, put your mask on before you assist anybody else, make sure that you are pouring into yourself. Number four, make sure that you are having that open line communication with your leadership and your workers, making sure that everyone has defined roles with their job duties, and making sure that everyone is on one accord and everyone is being heard when it comes to their work and their positions. Now, it's great to have teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work. But we have to make sure that the work is that we have a balance. We have a balance in work, and we have a balance life-wise. So we need to make sure that we have a work-life balance. Number six, make sure that you do that professional development, because professional development, it may seem tedious at the time, but it will rise you to the top. So make sure that you are getting more knowledge about your position. And organizations change, so making sure that you are changing. Be adaptive to change. Be adaptive to professional development. Make sure that you are taking advantage of training opportunities, development opportunities, to make you a better employee, to make you a better, hopefully, a leader in that organization. Number seven, communication, effective communication, and emotional intelligence. That is very big. So if you have a problem with emotional intelligence, make sure that you're checking your emotions at the door. I always say that, and you are also being open-minded to sharing and caring and having empathy for your other coworkers and your leadership. And so we have to make sure that we're having that effective communication, because every time you are sharing something with your fellow coworkers or even your leadership, it's in a negative light. But we have to make sure that we have that flow of communication, making sure that we're using the effective communication model, such as listening. The messenger, you're actually listening and you're actually processing the message, and then you are formulating an effective message to what you have received. Now, if you don't agree, we can always have a discussion of moderation of how to discuss something that you don't agree with. But yelling and being negative, that's not going to do it. So effective communication and emotional intelligence. Number eight is being present. And when I say being present, is, you show up and you ready to jump in, being a team player. That's one of the golden rules. And then treat other people how they want to be treated. So we have to make sure that's not the golden rule. That's a platinum rule. I'm sorry. That's the platinum rule. You want to make sure that you treat people how they want to be treated. And that's all I have. Those 8 things. You will flourish in the workplace. Your mental health will be healthy. You will have a healthy working environment. You will also you will be more efficient in your work and in your present self, and you will have more time management when you're focusing on those 8 things.
Absolutely. Candance, amazing, amazing, amazing. I love that. Not the golden, but the platinum rule. Treat others how they would like to be treated. Absolutely. Thank you for dropping those amazing gems. That was even more than 8 that you've dropped all throughout this course. It's been such a great and amazing conversation. We really appreciate you taking some time out to talk to us. I know you've helped a lot of people. Thank you to our commenters for asking some questions. You know what? Before we go, I really want you to announce any social media tags or websites or services you may offer, so folks can go check out your work and take part in the amazing work that you're doing.
So you guys can go onto my LinkedIn. I actually share a lot information around resiliency and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just how to be better in the workplace. But if you, I can drop my LinkedIn in the chat. Give me one moment. But if you go, so if you can't find me, you can literally type in my name on LinkedIn, Candance Willet, and I will pop right up on LinkedIn. And so, come follow me or, connect, and we can go from there. You guys can ask me any type of questions you like around, resiliency and how to be better. I am a certified health coach, a certified health education specialist, and a certified conflict resolution mediator. So I am always open to any questions that you may have, any resources. But yes, if you send me an invite on LinkedIn, my name, my whole name, you can actually conversate with me there.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. And remember, this live will be saved on YouTube among our other platforms. So everyone can go check out Candance, all of her amazing work. Again, thank you so much, Candance, for joining us today. I really learned a lot, and thank you for sharing your wealth of wisdom and knowledge.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for having me. And I really enjoyed this talk. It was very refreshing. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning into Black Mental Health Matters. Now, to support our show, please visit bmhm.org. Again, that's bmhm.org. Now, for the latest conversations on Black mental health, please join us again next week. Same time, same place. Goodbye, everyone.